Nice. All right, everybody. I am so excited to be here with Elizabeth Mills from Marine Mumbles. And Elizabeth is a marine biologist, engineer, science educator, artist, nature journaler, and YouTuber. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Oh God, I feel like I'm getting like I'm going to go with it. You know what? I'm going to take the vibe, like a Daenerys Targaryen vibe. I'm getting all the titles now. I need to be like,
Yes.
mother of barnacles, and I'm there.
Nice. Mother of Barnacles. I will add that to your bio for sure.
Yeah, I might
So
put it on my CV.
yes, do that. So, I'm sure some people have already seen some of your artwork and there's some hanging behind you, but can you share for our visual audience, could you share some pages or even little sketches or any note taking from recent trips to the ocean that you have with you?
Yeah, my nature journaling, it really varies depending on how long I have. This was from a workshop I did recently, and it was just these are sea squirts that so I like to do pop-up stuff in my journals as well, and but then I go all the way through to like doing quick scribbles. This is me sitting in my waterproof trousers and like me writing notes about what I'm seeing, to doing again more like flap up pages. So if I go rock crawling, I'll like write what's under rocks and things and like little scientific lists. It's really difficult with the opposite camera. I'm terrible at it. Yeah, I like to use Posca pens with lots of different bright
Ooh,
colors. If especially if something is like translucent, which is a lot happens in the ocean, it just happens to be translucent. And yeah, I suppose I've got stuff like starfish, which are
nice.
really cool. And oh, this is a tropical species of Christmas tree worms, which I found in the tropics. I did for a Christmas episode, which every time I see it reminds me of Christmas, but doesn't look anything like it. So
Yeah, I
um,
love that
yeah,
video you did where you had, what was that song that you did for Christmas? It was like the
yeah, the
12
the
days of,
night before Christmas poem, but I jigged it to be Rocky Shore related, I think.
yeah.
Fishmas. 'Twas the night before Fishmas is what I called it.
That was hilarious and so creative. So,
Thank
thanks
you.
for sharing some of your pages. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask first is how you like combine nature journaling and your science work. So I know you're working on a PhD right now, so and that probably takes a huge amount of time. But are those two things that you keep separate, or does your nature journaling and your science work somehow interact?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it interacts at a basic level in that I always find that art and science are very linked in the observation. I spend a lot of my time in the PhD looking at species, trying to work out what they are, going through like these wonderful ID books. I'm trying to think if I've got any close. I haven't, that have all these like art bits in to like point to the bits that you need to ID. So in that
Right.
sense, yes. But when it comes to actually, I suppose the science-ness of it, I'm not often drawing. However, you do have control over your thesis. And I'm hoping to have a section that's like illustrated at the back. It's been told it has to go in the appendix, but it's going in there. So like,
That's
it's like
great.
a little nice side note because I feel like I just need to put a bit of creativity in there as well.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. For the rest of us who aren't working on PhDs, I feel like really grateful that you're doing that. So, and kind of representing
Yes,
for us artists and
a
nature
bit of
journalists.
extra color.
Yeah, that is so cool. So, do you think then that, I mean, you're doing that in your thesis. Do you think this is something that actually could have a role for other people and in marine biology in general? Does nature journaling, does it have potential to help other people in that field?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I have it with me. Like my first ever, like what I call like a nature journal. I'm doing that because it didn't start as a nature journal.
Right.
Was just this like lined book with there's not much in it, but I started this when I was in my undergrad, and I had to learn all of these different species for a field
Mm.
trip. And so I started by drawing it, and that's kind of how I got back into drawing a lot of the marine things, which now are
Oh,
plastered everywhere,
nice.
because it just really helped me visualize it. You have to remember Latin names and different parts of them, and as soon as you visualize it, it really gets helpful. But it also creates a connection. I mean, people can
Mm.
go out and draw; you instantly become connected to that thing, and that's
Right.
what science is about as well. It's not, although you do have to be like unbiased, and there is that rigorous nature to science. There's also that you're picking that aspect, that bit you love, you're spending every day doing it. It's all about connection. And I find that the two are really interlinked. And a lot of people just enjoy drawing the species that they're in, even if they don't consider themselves artists, because you see it all day and it's just an expression of, I suppose, the love that you feel that you would share in a more creative way than writing, 100,000 word thesis, which is less than a nice spontaneous act of
Cool.
science.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how do you use it? Like you mentioned that you're going to have that part in the appendix, but and you use it as sort of like a study tool. Are there other ways that you use like nature journaling techniques or art techniques for your science?
I use it a lot in like presentations and everything. So if I go and present my science, I'll like do it to get more engaging, because it's nice and pretty. And also like in science as well, it is, I'm not saying competitive, but if you're in a room full of like 40 talks in a day,
Right.
and you want people to pay attention to it, putting a nice bit of art up there is actually really handy. Less so, I suppose, in the actual science furthering. But with my thesis, because it's interdisciplinary, I work with engineers as well as marine biologists. And engineers don't know, obviously, because that's not their field, about any of the nature whatsoever. So actually having a picture in front of me really helps, and like drawing something or putting that in my thesis really helps to show what it is. And also art as well is different to photography in that you can draw the ideal version of it. So if I do a lot of videoing, a lot of photography as well of marine things, but I don't find that like showing someone a picture of a barnacle, maybe they'll be like, oh, is it the thing in the background, is it that tiny thing, like I'd have to put an arrow to it. Whereas if I can show them a drawing, which is like the ideal one, not covered in all this gunk that's also growing on it, like just that, it really like focuses people's attention, and that saves me so much time. Because if you think you're having to explain every species you're talking about to everyone you talk about in a different discipline, of actually a quick bit of art really saves some time.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about also, is because I think there's sort of these two major spheres of benefits from the like nature journaling or the art or the drawing. One being the communication, which you spoke to. So the drawing and the nature journaling can serve as this powerful communication tool, which is something that you do a lot of science communication. And on your website, I saw some of these like awards and things that you've gotten. And so that's awesome. What about for as like a learning tool? So, sometimes I think that nature journaling, a lot of people that are nature journaling are not necessarily showing it, or they're not really emphasizing that communication potential, but they're using it as sort of like while they're in nature or observing something, it's helping them think, it's helping them like observe more. So can you give any examples of how you use it that way?
Yeah, I think it's a really good focusing technique, because when you're learning and things, because I go rock pooling all the time. My entire YouTube is full of rock pooling trips. And every time I go rock pooling, I still find something new. But it really, like, you also get very, like, you just want to go everywhere. You're like, oh, the next rock pool will have something. The next rock pool will have something. But if you sit down with a nature journal page and like force yourself to do that, you actually start to learn more about either what's you can see there, or you start to see new things. Really early on, the first time I ever drew on a rocky shore, I sat in this rock pool and I had my like I had my wellies in the water, and I sat there and I watched these little hermit crabs run around, and then I saw them start fighting because they're really territorial and grumpy and they're falling over things. And I just thought, I actually for the first time stopped and watched these creatures for 30 minutes, and they were so comfortable with me being there that they just got on with their normal lives. And it was because I was sitting there drawing that I got to observe that. So I think as a learning tool, because it focuses you then have to like look at the little details. You can't make it up. All the time, it's my worst habit in art is that I try to make things up in between the lines. I'm like, oh, let me just draw this, and you look at it at the end and think that's not right. What? And I was like, oh, I've not even looked, it's got like an extra thing here. It focuses you to do that, and then you can take that actually and use it in the science, because like there's identification features that get so specific. Like at one point I'm looking at an amphipod, I'm looking at like the leg hairs, and if two go forward and one go back, it's this species, but if all go forward, it's another species, which is just gets very tedious. But it's the same with art. Like you got to look at it at that level, because you can kind of tell as soon as you've done it if it's wrong or not, and then that's slightly irritating.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I feel like the first couple times I tried to nature journal in the intertidal zone, I mean, I've been doing it a lot lately, but I used to, it wasn't really my main place that I would go nature journaling. And I remember the first couple of times it was such a overstimulating environment and there was just so many things going on that it was really hard to figure out like how to focus. And I think that is a challenge that a lot of people have. I feel like there's certain environments and ecosystems that people go to nature journal or they just kind of feel like I don't even know where to start nature journaling here. So
Yeah.
do you have any tips like when someone gets to, an information dense environment like that, how to deal with that and just actually nature journal instead, because it's also super easy just to instead just take your phone and just go around taking pictures of stuff and thinking like, oh, I'll get my sketchbook out in a minute when I find like a more comfy spot or something better to draw. But like, what do you have any like advice for that?
Yeah, well, actually, you mentioned comfy spot. My number one tip would kind of be, if you're on the rocky shore, start with the comfortable spot. If you see one, test it out. If it's great, then stay there, because like that can make the difference between staying there or not. And that kind of helps you, because there's so many rock pools and all of them are really great. So usually I just look for like the comfortable spot and go with that, because there's always going to be something awesome on the intertidal shore. But maybe set yourself like a mini challenge each time. I do the same thing. I go rock pooling a lot. It's very also quite stressful environment because you're limited by time, so you just want to do everything and like fit as much in. But I will go specifically to, I'll be like, right, the last half an hour I am doing nature journaling. This is happening. I've done my rock pooling, and I find a comfy spot. But you can set yourself like mini challenges for each one. Like, you're going to focus on like a species, or do you want to focus on the rock pool? I really like, I have to see if I can find it actually, the silhouette of seaweed on the edge of a rock pool. And I'll start with that and outline my entire, I'm going to try and find it, my entire drawing with that first. And I just feel like having that on the page and like just something to like calm me down and just like, okay, now I'm in the zone.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And now I can't find it. If I find it, I will show you.
Yeah, that reminds me, maybe you know about this. I was listening to this new podcast that I listened to every single episode in their entire catalog after finding them. It's called Future Ecologies, and they're based in Canada, but they had a 3-part series on kelp forests and and trophic cascades. And they said that the very first field guide with photographs basically was done by this woman who, it was like when it was cyanotypes were still really new, basically like photographic paper that you would do silhouette. All you could do is like silhouettes basically, and you would lie them out in the sun with things on top of them. And she did a field guide on kelp. And she and they're supposedly beautiful images. I want to see if I can find the book, but she did all of these, and I think for each species of kelp, she did like 6 different perspectives of laying the kelp on these sheets of photographic paper. And supposedly that's a historic moment because no one before that had, I think they were using it for some dumb bureaucratic thing before that, the like mimeograph or whatever cyanotype paper. And she was the first person that used it. And that was, before then, there had not been any field guides. So it sounded really cool and similar silhouette, more of like a silhouette because not very much light goes through the pieces of kelp. So the outlines.
That's quite interesting actually, because I've got a video coming out soon actually. And I've got videos on my channel. It's not the same because I'm not taking pictures of it, but I've been pressing seaweeds in my nature journal as well.
Ooh,
to try, because they're very pretty. It's a bit of a spoiler. It does smell. I'm not gonna lie. I've got like and it doesn't always work. But I've got like a YouTube video that shows you how to press seaweeds properly if you wanted to put them on like watercolor paper. That doesn't quite work in nature journals because they get stuck to the other side. If that makes sense. But I've got some of them here. Oh, where like nice little fine seaweeds. I mean, that obviously is like jumped onto there and stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it doesn't take very long because you just pick them up and put them down, because there's so many beautiful seaweeds, and especially if they wash up, rather than going to pick them, there's so many just lying about. You can pick them up and put them down, and just like the intricate details of it. I love the outline and everything, but the seaweeds that I like to pick up are the ones that are so fine and fiddly that I'm not going to sit there and draw them.
Oh yeah.
Like, you can't. Like, you need like, it's just, you need a microscope and a magnifying glass and everything. So taking them back, and like what I want to do for the video, which is going to come out soon, hopefully. So go and subscribe if you want. Subtle is to like paint them afterwards, like paint around them, because they just make these beautiful patterns and everything. And and what you were saying about people coming up with science and it being new and everything, there's also like things are still being discovered today. We don't know very much about the ocean still, and it's great that people can go out and like find new species. And I mean, there's already thousands and thousands, millions already said, but it is really cool. And I imagine, and I always say this because people are talking about like, there's always this argument about where does science sit? Where do I move from like hobby to science?
Right.
But I always put my marker like way back down, because it's all the people that go out in nature. It's the nature journalists, the people that are out walking, it's the people that are fishing and rock pooling that are noticing changes. Like there are the ones that are at the they're doing stuff. And I always think that like, if the more people go out and do this, the more you notice, the more you draw, the more you pay attention, the more likely you are to find something new or find something that can be really useful. So I'm a big advocate for like that as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's sort of one of the things that I was interested in is sort of like, what do you think are, for sort of these amateur marine biologists, so to speak, or people who are just engaging with the ocean in other ways and not making a scientific career out of it? Like, what are some of the, important skills that for doing that kind of stuff? Like, what are some of the important skills that are helpful?
Yeah. Just observations are really, really handy. Like having just, again, it ties so well in with nature journaling, because just noticing everything, that's all that science is about. It's about finding that thing that isn't there. So going out and like constantly asking questions. No question's ever stupid. You ever come up with that phrase of like, oh no, like no question's ever stupid. No one should ever think that a question is stupid, because like anything could be something in science, and you just need to find that. So going out and asking, oh, what's there? What's that barnacle? Why is that barnacle there? Oh, there's not a barnacle here. There's not. Okay, well, that might not be. You might be able to tell the answer to it, but actually, if you go away and like do a bit of research, you might find that there's a certain barnacle that shows this, or a certain barnacle that shows that. So that's really handy. But I've also got a video out there with like 5 tips to see like if you want to do marine biology, like if you like these things, then marine biology might be for you. If you hate these things, then maybe, I don't know. I don't think you would hate them, but you know what I mean. And one of them on there is getting involved in like citizen science wherever you are, which is really handy. So there are these projects that scientists put out there, because we struggle to get the data and we don't have a lot of time sometimes for stuff. So it's putting projects out there and people can go and do the science, but it's exactly kind of what you would do on a day out anyway, which is really cool. So like one of them in the UK, and there'll be different ones around the world, it's like the Seaweed Search, and you just go down and walk along a line and you just mark down and take a picture of every seaweed that you see, which is pretty much what you could do nature journaling. You could take a picture and then draw the seaweed. There's lots of different things you can get involved in, and that you don't need to take forward to a scientific career, but it's just that little bit of like trying to help or
I love that.
multitasking. Right. You can nature journal and add some data to science.
Yeah, I love how you're making the barriers, you're removing the barriers to entry and sort of making the science more accessible to more people, even if they're not professionals. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So what is a common misconception that a lot of people have about marine biology?
Oh, the dolphins, the never-ending dolphins. Honestly.
Wait, I thought this episode was going to be all about dolphins.
Oh yeah. See, no. Yeah, that's probably the biggest misconception, and you're diving all the time. Both of those are very uncommon, actually. marine biology is that I think the broadest career you could ever hear, like have. Like you're going from like you can go from like working with microscopic tiny little things to looking and studying ocean currents to working with communities that live near the coast to getting involved to putting trackers on turtles and studying their movement around the world to moving to the Antarctic and working at the Antarctic stations where you could be looking at dolphins or seals or whales, or you could be looking at the microbiology. You could be diving to the deep sea in a submarine, or you could be in a lab looking at data and advising the government. Like there's just so much and very little it's about like this perception that it's like dolphins and diving in the tropics, and actually it's so varied and so much that it's not even 1% of what it is. You can get into it if you want to, if you're absolutely desperate. but I don't want anyone to go into marine biology be disappointed, because like you're honestly thinking about it, I can't even think of a single lecture I had on a dolphin. Like I can't think of one. Like maybe all the marine biology lecturers are actually just turning around and be like, we're not even going to mention them. Like, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. That's a joke.
Okay, got it. So for nature journalers that are going to the rock pools, or in the States we call them tide pools, or to the ocean, what is one thing, if you could only teach like an amateur ocean lover, amateur nature journaler, like one thing about the ocean or about the rocky shore, like what is one thing that they should know?
Ooh, oh, see, now I'm going to go into the overload of like that's too much.
Or like one thing.
Oh, okay, I've got something. That I would say that every single meter on the rocky shore is the most important of like anywhere that you could walk. So if you walk in a park, you walk a meter, it doesn't really matter. There's grass to grass, or maybe there's a tree. Like there's nothing too massive changing. But every meter on the rocky shore is so challenging because you're losing the water for a bit more. So each species is having to adapt to maybe like half an hour extra out of water. So as you walk along, just look from like when you're walking from the top to the bottom, and you'll just see the species change, and just know that every single species has adapted to live there specifically in that tiny little section, or where that section is, and it's competing with all the other things, and all of the features have gone in for millions of years, and nowhere else in the world is there that much change in such a short amount of time that you can see just by walking along.
Wow. So how would you call that? Like that sort of like gradient, or what? How would you describe that?
Officially it's called zonation.
Zonation.
You can like look up, like there's like 4 or 5 big zonation zones, if that makes sense. And there are really interesting species that like mark the edge of them. Like it's like you're like often see, and you spoke about it in the rock pooling video that we did, that it's banded. There's also a vertical zonation. It's the same thing, you know, up and down versus like how long about the water. And you see in the video that you sent me the footage, it's just that line, and that's because that species is adapted to live in the maximum and the minimum and in between, and they will not move past that point. And it's really cool because you can get to the point where you start to like read the shore. You're like, oh, this is out of water for this long, and it's really odd to see such a straight line sometimes in nature, but it really is like someone's just gone along and cut off.
Got it. So people who are nature journaling out there in the tide pools or just exploring the tide pools, pay attention to that difference from how far from the ocean, how much up onto the shore, and think about that variable of how long the creatures are out of water as like one of these really important deciding factors in what's going on there. Cool. That's a great one. Okay, so why do you think people should nature journal about the ocean? Like if people have the choice of like, oh, well, if you live near the coast, oh, I could go to the forest or I could go to the rocky shore. Why do you think people should nature journal about the ocean in general, or the, you know, rocky shore in particular?
Yeah. I just, sorry, the slam answer came into my head of like, land's boring, ignore the land. I was like, no, we should be like this. I don't mean that at all. Just like, you know, because it is such an accessible place to see somewhere that's like a different world. Like the
Mm.
intertidal zone, if you can get to it, is the undersea world brought to you for a specific section of the day. There is so much life there, and it's so different to what is on land, and it's you just immediately get transported. Like I always feel like, I mean, obviously wherever you go in nature, you can like switch off and you know, if you can, and wherever you find your thing. But I find as soon as I step onto the rocky shore, it's like I'm somewhere else. It's such a shift in your being and such a shift in where you are that you can't help but not think of it just the rocky shore. And it's a real switch off. It's really calming. Sound of the ocean is really nice. And the species are really, really, really weird. I guarantee you won't find weirder species anywhere. So if that's your thing, please go to the rocky shore. Weird ocean creatures.
Great. Speaking of weird, let me just interject this weird,
Ooh.
a little bit of weird. This was in a tide pool, so even the rocks are weird. So, okay, I'm going to say hi to some of the people who are commenting in the chat. Some of them had to leave. Wendy, Sabrina's in Germany. I think she had to turn in for the night. Eli's here. Jean is here. Angie was here but had to leave. And Recovering Soul. You know, there's some other people watching who aren't posting the comments. You can post in the comments. I don't know which side it is for you, but if you have any questions or things like that. All right, so a couple more things about the sort of rock pools is what do you think about sort of hands-on versus hands-off? You know, I recently was hired to teach a nature journaling thing at some tide pools near San Francisco by several families. And I went there and I told everyone to bring like Tupperware containers and I had all these nets. And then I got there, and at that particular place, at least, it was you weren't supposed to touch anything, and you couldn't even like, they were like policing where you stepped and all of that. So I know that the answer is probably it depends, but
Yeah.
What is your sort of philosophy around hands-on versus hands-off, and what are the implications either way on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think it's all about balancing up the educational benefits versus the stress of the species. I'm not a fan of nets. Nets don't tend to either be very helpful in catching things, and also like you're doing a lot of damage as you like sweep. You can't control it as much. Tupperware can be useful if you can get the species, but when you come to handling things, I very rarely take something out. If I feel like sharing it on a video and getting up close, it is something that I wouldn't be able to capture anyway, then I do. But you don't want to do anything small at all. You want to avoid small things because it's so stressful on them.
Mm-hmm.
You only really want to like hold yeah, okay. Usually I would avoid fish. If you can, avoid fish as much as possible, unless you're really experienced with it. Things like crabs and they're really hardy. You always want to be care and respectful. You always make sure you pick them up. You don't drop them. You very carefully handle them. Don't pick them up and get scared and drop them. I have videos to show you how to do it safely so you don't get scared. And that's okay. But I genuinely also think that like handling stuff isn't always necessary. I've seen far better experiences rock pooling, standing at the edge of a rock pool, maybe with my nose against the water of the rock pool, you know, like right in, like looking at species. Then because as soon as you get them out, they're stressed and they're not in their natural habitat. And actually, it's very difficult to get them. And like lots of people might go after something. And I genuinely think avoid it if you can. But if there's something, say, that you want to share or show, then there are ways to do it very carefully. You also need to double check where you are. There are protected areas. The thing about walking and where you're looking, there are protected species. So I suppose it's just being educated about where you are, and always try to do it so that you're not leaving a big impact on anything. Don't get obsessed with one organism. Don't 20 people pile around one thing to try and do that. You just need to treat it with respect. You're a guest in the rock pool, and that will kind of be my take on it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's always an interesting balance there. I know I've read some stuff recently by like this guy Richard Louv. He spoke at the Nature Journaling Conference, but he wrote the book Last Child in the Woods, and he wrote a book called Nature Deficit Disorder, and he talks a lot about how many young people today have grown up with so much knowledge about how much humans are hurting the environment and they're learning a lot intellectually about the environment and all the problems, but they haven't formed an emotional connection with nature. And he said that most of the conservationists and people who have made huge impacts on helping protect nature and wildlife and voting to protect things had early childhood experiences where they were often very engaged in nature in ways that we would think of as disruptive or destructive, and that they actually formed like an emotional connection through that. And he said that it's possible for us in our attempt to protect things to scare this whole several generations of humans from ever creating like a bond with nature that would end up leading them to actually care about nature, even for voting. Like right now in the US, the interest in a lot of the parks and the visitation of the parks has changed and decreased. Anyways, it's an interesting balance there for sure.
Yeah, and I would say with rock pooling and things, like holding a crab is amazing. Like it's there's something, that connection to it. It's also a great species for it because it is hardier. It's got a shell and it's protected and everything. Because as a kid, that's what I did. Everyone goes crabbing. Everyone looks for crabs. It's like this great thing. I think there's probably just this worry that like sometimes you think that if you say, go out and like do this, that there's going to be people that take it too far. But yes, I agree that, there is, you can't replace those memories, which is really good, but also showing people that being around nature and in it as well is valuable, as if that makes sense, like the trade-off between the two.
Yeah, and maybe careful. I mean, this is where we need scientists like you, is having careful, intentional decisions made about like, okay, this area absolutely needs to be protected. Mm-hmm. Nobody should go in there at all. And then maybe there's other areas where it's like, okay, let the kids in there, things are going to get messed up a little bit, but like that's an area for people to interact. And then also, with the numbers of people, it creates a problem, because obviously if everybody went out and caught crabs like you and I do, then that would be a problem. But so it's complicated.
Yeah, it is a complicated thing. I also think it's a trade-off between like, you want to show people, you want to get up close, you want that experience with it, but then why do we always feel the need to put something in a glass jar?
Right, yeah.
There's also that like we just seeing it in like a rock jar, like just there. It is that trade-off. But then you can see and draw it better, and it is kind of a case-by-case basis. But I would say, just as a general rule, avoid nets if you can. That is something that we've kind of been taught and said that, don't use nets just because you're hitting too much for the benefit of the net.
Right. Good to know. I did not know about that. So thanks for sharing about that. Okay, let's jump into some talking about nature journaling and sort of art specific stuff. So could you describe sort of like your process, or, I see the paintings on the wall behind you. Do you study things in the field and do sketches or take photographs and then work from home, or what different types of approaches do you use?
Yeah, if I'm nature journaling, like obviously out, I will do. I think try and get more like colorful things. I'm going more for the emotion if I'm sketching in the field, like how I'm feeling in that moment. My sketches aren't very good in terms of like, if you were gonna look at realism or whatever, they're not close to that. But it's capturing that, how I'm feeling at the time, and I'll often bring in like little bits, the details that I've seen as I've gone. I'll be like, oh, I'm not seeing that right now, but I'll put that in. But then when it comes to doing more of like these sketches, which take longer, I've got a lot of video footage, a lot of photos on my website, and I'll kind of tie that in with what I've seen in either the scientific world, maybe some of my ID books, and sit down and do that. And that's more of a trying to get the form and the species right, and kind of portray the personality in a sense, like capture the essence of it, rather than focus like too much on the taxonomy. But it's also about being kind of, I don't know, it's just representing that species. I feel like I'm looking at how it looks, because I will quite often see a species like loads on I'll video it loads. I've got loads of photos. But when I sit down to paint it, I'll notice something I've never seen before. And that's kind of what the process for me is. It's making sure that I'm actually looking at what I've seen. I'm not just taking it for granted. That I'm like, oh, just yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what are some of your favorite art tools that you use?
I am obsessed with outlining everything in black. So watercolor is my go-to thing because I can outline everything in black. So I love fine line. I love like dots and lines and art and things like that. So watercolor and fine line is my main go-to. But I also have things like the Posca pens, which are like the acrylic paint pens, and acrylics and things. And I like the Posca pens because I can just go crazy and just do these bright colors, and I don't have to worry so much. But also, I can.
Which Posca pen colors do you use?
I literally have a drawer full of all of them. Like it's not like I brought my first pack and went, oh no.
Okay. And they're like that like really common size. They're not like those huge ones.
The drawer is here.
Okay.
Can you hear the rattle of all of them?
Yeah.
I've got like normal ones.
Okay.
Got some giant ones.
Got it.
This is a slightly glittery one.
Nice.
There's constant Posca pen purchasing is
and
unfortunate.
Then what about watercolor brand? What watercolors do you use?
Yeah, I use Winsor and Newton watercolors. I have this great set actually. Well, look at them. They're so beautiful. They're so messy. I'm a messy watercolor person.
Wow, nice big palette. Okay.
But I love them. There's actually a really nice story behind getting these. I did a painting for one of my lecturers at undergrad, and she brought me the watercolor paint set as like it was like a thank you for doing it, which was like really sweet. I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah, brushes. I don't know anything about brushes. I just get whatever's cheapest from the art store.
Okay, got it.
It doesn't always go in my favor, but
there's a question here from Wendy about your camera. I've seen your camera in some of your pictures and stuff before, but could you mention what camera you use?
Yeah, I use the Olympus TG5. It's a great camera. It's really, really awesome. I love it so much, and it's bright red, so win-win on all fronts.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So what about sort of like dealing with logistics at the ocean? I made a video like how to nature journal in the tide pools at night, and I think I might have made another one where I talk a little bit about just some tips for nature journaling in that environment, which can be kind of challenging. Like, do you have any recommendations, like general tips for people who want to go and maybe haven't nature journaled there before?
Yeah, I don't actually, thinking about it, I don't actually use that giant set when I go rock pooling. I have a smaller set.
Okay.
I take very limited stuff with me. I usually just take like, instead of like a lot of the tiny fine line pens, I take like a brush pen, which is, you can kind of get all the line sizes out of it, but you just do really quick.
Which brush pen?
I've literally, my whole desk is surrounded by art stuff. Is it Faber-Castell or Castle?
Oh, okay. And it's like does it have bristles or is it like a nib?
It's like, oh, I don't know if I've got the one here. It's like just like a long, yeah, like almost like a bristle, but it's like inked together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'll try to look it up. Faber-Castell. What does it have? Anything written on it?
I haven't actually got the brush pen with me because it's in it's in my pencil case.
But it is a Faber-Castell brush pen.
Yes. Oh, here we go. It's in my. This is my nature journal pencil case.
Nice.
Which my mum made for me. Yeah, it's like a.
Okay, got it.
That kind of one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it just means it stops me doing too much. Because that's another problem that the opposite of being like too unfocused is I get too focused and I want to spend 20 minutes drawing a crab leg, but I've only got 20 minutes because then the sea's at my feet.
Right.
So picking a bigger nibbed pen and like just drawing big shapes, big outlines and things actually really helps me when I'm out nature journaling. I feel like that's much more successful. And the video of you drawing the crab is quite similar. I love the way that you just built that crab as you drew it out of those big bold lines, and it just appeared. I was like, oh, that is literally it was very impressive. But I feel like limiting myself to that.
I used to always use like a mechanical pencil, and then it would just take forever, and for in the field that it just doesn't work. So it wasn't really didn't come naturally with like my personality for drawing, but it's just been practical for the field for just going faster. What about for people who aren't able to access the ocean? Do you have any tips? Like, can people, like, some of the things I thought of are like going to aquariums, or maybe there's like certain marine laboratories that have open hours that people could visit, or like natural history museums, or books and photos. You mentioned your website having photos. Like, what do you think about some of those options for people who, for whatever reason, don't live near the coast or aren't able or don't feel safe going out there? What are some options for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this past couple of years, or however long it's been, is the prime example of that. I don't live too far from the beach really, but in lockdown I was stuck in, we couldn't travel that far. So it's the first time in my life I've ever been cut off from the sea. It's the first time I really realized what it's like to not be able to reach that. So I redesigned my website actually during this time to have like almost 1,000 photos. There's about 75 species there. I'm adding more of the time of all these different things. And you can, it's not done like taxonomically. It's not done like, look for this Latin name. It's done like with art. So you click on the art to like go through the different species so that you can find them easier. And then there'll be a little bit of a description and all these photos of all these species that you can look at. I also have videos on my website that have like on my YouTube channel that are like, I put the camera in the rock pool for like 10 minutes and just record what happens and then put them online so that people can draw from that as well. And I love aquariums. I love going and drawing in aquariums. I find that really, really fascinating. Very difficult. I find that harder than rocky shore stuff, because at least some of the stuff stays still on the rocky shore. I find aquarium species, they're like, it's too much. But I really, really enjoy it. And yeah, just doing all of those things. Natural museums. I could live in a museum. Someone would let me. It's that thing of like closing time. Like, can I sneak and live behind here in the films? I agree with all of those things. I think it's just about finding a personal connection and what you enjoy and how you can switch off as well. How you can use that, because I love going rock pooling, and I will probably always pick rock pooling over things, but I love museums and I love aquariums, and if I'm in the mood to do that, then going to do that is really handy. And I find I've got a video actually. I keep saying I've got a video, but I've been doing YouTube for like 3 years now, and a weekly video, so I've done a lot. I feel like every time I come up with an idea, I'm like, oh, I've done that already. I'll tell you about it. I went to this museum and it had these big sculptures of all of these different creatures, like big turtles, dolphins, things like that. And you could walk around and catch them at different angles. And I'm terrible at perspective, absolutely awful. And it was all about learning how to do the perspective of it, because it doesn't move, but it's the real life imitations of them. And I find that really handy. That was like the hardest art class I've given myself. I couldn't, like, some bits I just couldn't get my head around. But you're not going to learn if you don't push yourself. So I recommend doing that if you need to learn perspective, or at least try to. It was so hard.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of foreshortening that happens when you're nature journaling at the aquariums, and the fish are like turning around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I really like to go in San Francisco. There's a good one, the California Academy of Sciences. This is from their flooded Amazon exhibit.
Oh, cool.
Freshwater stuff, but I try to just practice drawing fish, especially when they're in the weird positions. But the main thing that's been helping me in those kind of situations is now I got these noise canceling headphones.
Screaming.
As
so
much.
much screaming. So much screaming. I just went to look. That was one from I did from one of the aquariums. But look, there's no foreshortening or any. I've just gone with 2D. I was like, but at this point, I'm like, nope, not having it.
It happens to everybody. All right. Well, let's. I have one more question before the lightning round. What would your dream project be?
Ooh, what in terms of this is what I'm in
Yeah, in
terms of
terms
like
of your career, in terms of your life's work, what would be like the holy grail for you?
um oh, that is a big question. Is that not? That's like a I need a cup of tea to answer that question. Like
I mean,
thinking
if
about
you
it.
don't, you can come up
No,
with
no,
a,
yeah, I'll come up with things. No, it's a good question. I love connecting people to nature, and I love I love the ecology. I like the science behind everything, like the interest of like looking at the rocky shore and bringing people in. But as I've gone through my PhD and everything, I've kind of noticed the disconnect with people and science, and I've noticed the use of art. So I'd love a project that kind of combined all of that to show people that science isn't something that people just do in lab coats, that you need to be a genius for. You don't need to do that. And teaching people rocky shore stuff is actually really handy to do that, because you can quite quickly go from, oh, that's a crab, that crab behaves differently to this crab. That's a, and actually it behaves differently to that crab because of this. And this crab eats this. And all of a sudden, within about 20 minutes, I could get someone from like base level to something I'm learning at undergrad. And
Mhm.
very rarely does that happen anywhere else. And so a project that would kind of combine all of those would be really handy. I don't know if that exists massively in the world. It does exist in some circumstances, but I don't know how that would exist. But I would love to do that, to be able to show people, and hopefully at the end of that get science, which is kind of the science-ness of certain things. So yeah, that would be kind of my dream project at the moment.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So if there's anyone out there who wants to collaborate or fund that project,
Please
contact
do.
Elizabeth. All right. Okay, let's are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah.
All right, great. So, first question, I kind of already feel like I can guess the answer. Is coffee an essential art supply?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were going to say tea.
Well, that is true, but tea doesn't taste as good out of a flask, and I always take a flask with me, so it's always coffee out
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah,
So
something something about the metallic taste of the flask and tea does not
yeah,
work.
so coffee, I feel like it covers up more off flavors than tea does.
Yeah, and the caffeination is important, but it's probably just because I'm like, I need a proper cup of tea. It needs to be the
So you bring coffee when you're rock pooling.
Yeah, a lot of the time, especially when it's cold in Scotland, it's required to heat up your internalness. That or hot chocolate. But yeah, a cup of coffee is always handy. But I think that just comes with my life now. I'm not too far from caffeination at any time point.
Mhm. Is your studio organized or messy?
Messy, 100%, not even close to organized.
Do you like nature journaling alone or with other people?
Oh, I imagine I'd like it with other people. I haven't actually had much chance to do it with other people. Just because of this year, I suppose.
Mhm.
I did it with Tim Pond, who is this unbelievable illustrator. He's so good in the natural in the London Aquarium, and
Oh
it was the best.
wow.
It was the best day of one of the best days I've ever had. So yeah, people. But I've only done it with one person.
Oh, I want to go to the London. I'll nature journal with you at the London Aquarium.
Yeah, come on over. That'd be so good.
Yeah. Does your family understand your art?
Yes, yeah, my family are really lovely, and my dad and our whole family were like fishermen, so we do a lot of fishing and stuff. My mum's I think she's a really good artist as well. So I did art as a kid with her growing up. That was like how we spent time together. So yeah, they are
Nice.
100% behind me.
Oh, that's great. Do you eat snacks while you're nature journaling or making art?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I risk a cup of tea at the start. It doesn't last very long because my paintbrush always ends up in the
Oh no.
drink.
Yeah.
Like without, I've only got a good 10 minutes before I make that mistake.
Oh
But
shoot.
no, I get very in the zone.
Okay.
When I am drawing.
Got it. Would you rather nature journal plants or animals?
Animals. Yeah,
Okay. Ink or graphite?
ink.
Great. If you could nature journal with any historical figure, who would you go with?
Oh, that would have to be. Is it? I forgot. Is it Haeckel? And is it
Yeah,
Ernst Haeckel? It's not
yeah,
Ernst. I keep
yeah,
saying
yeah,
Ernest, but it's Ernst Haeckel. Oh my goodness, what an
yeah.
afternoon that would be.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah. And he had like an assistant. I think I remember in one of the books I have about him, there's a photo with him and his assistant did a lot of can't remember what his whole process was for the etching, but anyways, he had an assistant that did a lot of the work as well.
Yeah,
Um,
they can come along too. That'd be good. Both of them together.
I thought you were going to say Darwin because he was super into barnacles also.
Oh, he was super into barnacles. Oh, that is well, yes, that was true, but I don't think the artwork of
No, no, he didn't really
can be
draw.
beaten.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did some lovely. He did do. I mean, obviously his journal and things are
Mhm.
famous, and the little sketches and everything. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
come to mind the
I
color.
read this story about his son when he was little. His son was like playing with another kid at another kid's house, and Darwin's son was like looking around their house, and then he asked the other boy, he's like, "Where?" Because I guess they had Darwin had like an outbuilding or something where he did a lot of work, and Darwin's son was like, "Where does your dad do his barnacles?" Because I guess Darwin would go in the shed and just be working on barnacles all the time. So
Oh, that's so cool.
that
I
everybody had
actually
a barnacle room.
that would be the best room. I have a barnacle room. No, this my art studio. I went to. I think I've been to Darwin's house thinking about it
Oh,
because it's down south in England where I'm from.
cool.
But I went when I was like really young as a school trip, and I don't think I appreciated it as much as I should have done. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, was there a barnacle room? Do I need to go back and find that? I probably do.
Maybe my story is just apocryphal. Maybe it's not even like a real true story. I'm trying to remember where I read that, but I'll have to look into
I I think it was. I think Darwin spent 12 years studying barnacles. Like, if you think about
that.
all the other stuff he's discovered in his
Mhm,
career, and he spent 12 whole years of it on
mhm.
barnacles. So that's just how awesome they are. He did write like this like quote. I can't remember. Oh, it's something like, "I have never hated anything as much as I've hated a barnacle." By the end, and he also hated it because I study biofouling, which is my PhD is on biofouling, which is like all the rocky shore
Right.
creatures that live on man-made surfaces, but they live on
Mhm.
the bottom of boats. And I think he wrote this quote about when they were stuck on a boat going very slowly, and he was like, "My barnacles are. I just want to get home."
That's so funny. I'm gonna just
Yeah.
type biofouling into here so people can
Mm.
see. It's a kind of a weird word. I'm surprised spell check didn't change that for me. Okay, so next lightning round question is: you're going to be stranded on a desert island with lots of cool stuff to look at, and you can only bring 5 nature journaling supplies with you. What 5 nature journaling supplies would you bring? Your
Um,
survival needs will be taken care of, so you don't have to worry about like survival stuff.
can I volunteer to go to this island? This sounds amazing. um, do pens count as one, or
Yes.
pens, watercolor, um, watercolor like big paper and a notebook. I'm putting that as two. Like,
Okay.
and because I like both, I can't decide. And a pencil.
All right. Nice
That's what
job.
I
That
got.
was easy for you. If there was a nature journaling Olympics, which event would you compete in?
Oh, who can sit in a rock pool the longest with with a wet soggy bum and draw
Nice.
for the longest? I'd
Nice.
win.
Good job. Okay. Which Star Wars character would be best at nature journaling?
Oh my goodness, that's the best question I've ever had. I'm gonna have to say Darth Vader, because I personally think I am a version of Darth Vader. I went to my graduation as Darth Vader, my actual undergraduate graduation as Darth Vader. So Darth Vader
Okay.
would be the best, and
Why?
also even if he wasn't the best, he would just tell everyone else in a very rude way that he was the best, and
Okay.
they wouldn't have a chance.
All right. Okay. Darth Vader. Um, Okay, great. So that's it for the lightning round. Nice job. Oh, make your best lightning sound.
sound.
Yeah. Nice.
That,
Awesome. Okay. Great. So here, some of my closing questions here. Where do you see nature journaling going in the future?
I would love to see nature journaling going into schools more. I
Mm,
would love to see like that link between natural history and science, but like actually seeing it taught at a lower level, and not taught in the sense of like you need to draw well, or like, you
mm,
know, I just the experience of nature through nature journaling, I think could be really handy. I think that's missing from schools. There's not a lot of that
mm,
connection. Maybe a trip to the zoo once
mm.
is about as much as you get.
Cool. Yeah, that's really funny because right after I get off here with you, I'm actually applying for this place-based learning coordinator position at a local middle school, and the job description is broad enough that would allow for me to definitely insert a lot of nature journaling into the curriculum and the
Oh.
project. So
Oh, well, good luck. Maybe I'm having a psychic vision now. Maybe that was like, you know, your very near future.
yeah, there we go.
Hopefully.
And sort of related to this and some of the stuff we talked about earlier, it seems like, kids these days are often very aware of some of these like ocean issues that are happening, or
Mm.
people are, have visceral sort of memories of seeing some of these images of like, plastic islands in the ocean, and coral reefs dying, and all these other terrible things that have been happening in the ocean. So what do you think, with all of this information about all of these, like, overfishing and ocean acidification and climate change, what can nature journaling and nature journalers do in this situation?
Yeah, so it is so difficult sometimes to just stop that feeling of dread, I suppose. But I like to use, and my whole channel and everything is about this, and it's this kind of zone of called ocean optimism.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that the more connected you become, the more you fall in love with the species, the more easier it is to protect. But I just say to people when I say this, and I've done workshops on plastic, and we've ended it with this topic of like, you know, how do you get over this? But it's your voice matters. People don't say that. Like, you really need to understand, like, it does. If you have a conversation just with someone, that could have a chain reaction of telling someone a new fact about nature, telling someone, it doesn't even have to be what's going on like that's bad, but you know, telling people about the issues can help, or telling people this is fascinating, this is amazing, did you know this? And no, I didn't. And that person could go on and tell someone else. And right from that basic level to doing things like writing to members of parliament, to writing to industries, to giving talks to people, maybe if you have to do a project at school, picking something ocean related, things like that can have a massive impact. You might not be able to see it. It's not something we can really quantify, unless you're like signing petitions and things and you can kind of see the numbers. But I'm a strong believer in that, because if we don't talk about it, and if we just let this thing seem distant, seem this thing that we see on documentaries, we hear it on the news, what can we do about it? We can't do anything. As soon as you take the thing of like, okay, I might not be able to go over there and stop the ocean burning, which seems to be happening, um, and
Mhm.
stuff like that myself, but maybe I can do my part. And actually it snowballs pretty quickly from there.
Mhm.
You know, you suddenly get to talking about it more, and then you've got a YouTube channel, and then you've got you know, all of this stuff. So please don't, to anyone, ever underestimate the power of your voice, and just see where it leads you.
That's great. Yeah, I watched. I listened to a podcast recently on that same Future Ecologies podcast, which I highly recommend. They had an amazing
Mm.
whole thing about jellyfish and a whole thing about kelp forests. They also had a whole thing about climate inaction, and they mentioned this ocean optimism hashtag and movement. And it's also like really important, I think, to be clear that yes, there are like extremely problematic things happening, but also partly because of the way that the media works, the negative stories end up creating this feeling in people that nobody's working on solutions and there's nothing actually being done, or like that there's not any like good news, and there often are things like that that are underreported. And so they even mentioned, you know, some places where coral reefs are being saved or doing well, and focusing on bright spots and trying to see like what can we learn about these situations where things are actually working out better.
Yeah, and with that, I do a lot of science communication because I like to share what I learn
Right.
and share what other people learn. But that's the thing as well, is that like I know so many great scientists doing so many great things, and I know very few in terms of how much science is out there doing it. But it's that, because it's done almost behind closed doors, because we're there is a disconnect between the science that we do and what we tell people, and that's not particularly scientists' fault, but it's not our fault. You know, we should be working more with science communicators, which are their own separate thing, or doing science communication as well, because and again, like the media won't pick up stuff
Mm-hmm.
that's happy and things, but there is amazing stuff going on out there, and people are doing some fantastic research that's getting funded, and it is, you know, we are trying to do it, but also we are still looking for more and more help. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you are interested in science, there is so a place for people to come and add their own little slice of creativity to solve this problem,
Mm-hmm.
because really scientists only look at a tiny slither per person, and if
Mm-hmm.
you have an idea that you think could help, even if you're really young and it might be a while between you get there, like follow it through. Like it could help. We're looking for answers and solutions, and you know, people are looking at how tiny microalgae can dissolve plastics, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
all of these different things. It's really exciting. And so don't think that people aren't out there trying, and not that you can't get involved, because you know, science is waiting for you, as well as nature journaling and sharing that is amazing. Plus, like the reach that science, that art has, is incredible. I mean, I could say a fact about my science and no one will look at it, but I put that with a picture of what I'm doing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all suddenly gets shared around the internet. I think it's great and amazing. And if more scientists and people like nature journalists and scientific artists work together, I honestly think we could really make a difference.
Awesome. There's a couple of things that people have mentioned here, so I'm just going to share this comment, and then I'm going to answer Cindy. That Future Ecologies is a podcast if you search for it. And then also, Elizabeth, where can people find out more about you? Where I shared your YouTube here a couple times. I'll post that one more time. I think people should be able to click on this link in the comments. You can also just search for Marine Mumbles on
Yes,
YouTube and find
which
it,
is
right?
there. Yes. So yeah, I would really appreciate anyone going and subscribing to my YouTube channel. I promise you, it is a fun family over there. We have rock pooling adventures. I do scientific art, nature journaling. I do weird facts and breakdowns of the most bizarrest creatures, and most of these creatures you can find for just the price of a pair of wellies. And how to get to the coast. So that's really good. I also have a website, marinemumbles.com, which I've mentioned has all the photos and everything on. And I'm Marine Mumbles on all social medias. So just let me know. But if you want to ask any questions, chuck them in my YouTube comments, and I'm active on there and happy to take the conversation further.
Yeah, and we did a collaboration. Did the second video just
Yes.
come out today?
Yes, video came out today, so it's so good. I was so impressed with your work, Paulie. It was so fantastic. It's this new YouTube series I'm doing, where people around the world will rock pool on the same day and will compare what we find. So I'm in Scotland and Marley is in California, and we compare what we find. It is absolutely amazing. It's really cool. But I think I should bring this up. I bring it up in the video. If you haven't checked it out yet, Marley, how do you rock pool barefoot? I don't understand. How?
I don't know. I just got used to it. I mean, I think I was walking barefoot for like you know, a couple years where I was doing these kids nature programs and we are outside every day through the entire year, and I just started going barefoot. And so now it's like I rarely get, you know, and you'd think like, oh, the muscles are so sharp or whatever, but they're actually, I find I get injured the least when I'm barefoot. And sometimes I do wear, we call them rain boots, you call them wellies.
Oh
But
yeah.
sometimes I wear those, but then I really hate it when they get water inside of them from the top.
Yeah.
And I also have some like neoprene booties that I've tried, and I have a pair of like strap-on sandals. And I find that none of them are, they all are can be slippery. Like we have this
Yeah.
matte algae, this like red or really dark, yeah, it's a red algae, I think, but it's super slippery. And I just find that barefoot is actually pretty versatile.
I
So
mean, fair play to you. I was like, I just, I was like, oh my goodness, are your feet not shredded?
cool. Well, everybody go check out. It sounds like Wendy has already checked out your YouTube channel. All of your content is so fun. I mean, I think the first time I watched one of your videos, I was just laughing out loud the whole
Oh, good.
time and
Yeah.
learned a lot. So definitely check out her YouTube. And I'll, in the recorded version of this, I'll post a link that people can click on. But thank you so much for making the time, and thanks for everybody who joined in for the live. It's been really fun talking to you today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This has been great. It's been awesome.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.